When the billionaire heiress crashed into the single dad's life, she didn't know he was the only man who could save her empire. Rain hammered the overpass. Headlights skidded sideways across black ice. A silver sedan spun once, twice, and slammed into the guardrail with a sound like a bone breaking. Inside, a woman in a torn evening gown pressed a bloody hand against the cracked window, her eyes locked on the stranger running toward her through the storm, a man who was supposed to be nobody. Before the night was over, he would pull her out of that wreck. Before the month was over, her enemies would try to bury them both. If this story reaches you, hit that like button and drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. Stay with me until the end. You won't regret it. The gas station on Route 9 never really closed, and that was the only reason Lucas Reed still had a job. He leaned against the counter at 2:15 in the morning, flipping through a paperback someone had abandoned on the magazine rack 3 weeks ago. The spine was broken. The last 20 pages were missing. He'd read it anyway, because reading a book without an ending felt about right for his life. Outside, the rain had started around midnight and hadn't let up. It came down in sheets now, hammering the tin awning over the pumps, turning the parking lot into a shallow black lake that reflected the sickly fluorescent sign above the door. Shell. Open 24 hours. One letter flickering, the S going dim and bright like it couldn't decide whether to quit. Lucas understood the feeling. He set the book down when headlights swept across the windows. A pickup truck pulled up to pump 4 and a man in a soaked trucker cap climbed out, cursing at the sky. Lucas watched him fumble with the card reader for a minute before the door chimed and the man stumbled inside, shaking water off like a dog. "Reader's broken on 4, the man said. "It's not broken. You gotta hold the card still." I held it still. "Hold it stiller." The man muttered something Lucas didn't catch and went back out. Lucas watched through the glass until the pump clicked on, then picked his book back up. This was the job. 9 hours of nothing, punctuated by 5 minutes of someone being frustrated at him about something he couldn't fix. $13.50 an hour. No benefits. The manager, a heavy-set guy named Dale, who smelled permanently of microwave burritos, had promised him a raise at the 6-month mark. That had been 14 months ago. Lucas didn't push. Pushing got you noticed, and being noticed was a luxury he couldn't afford. At 32, he had the kind of face people forgot immediately. Dark hair cut short because he did it himself with clippers in the bathroom mirror, a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in 3 days, eyes that looked older than the rest of him. He was tall but not striking, built but not showy, the kind of man who moved through a room without leaving a ripple. He'd worked hard at becoming forgettable. It hadn't always been that way. Once, a long time ago, he'd been the kind of person people looked at twice. That man was dead. Lucas had buried him himself. His phone buzzed against the counter. He glanced at it. A text from Mrs. Alvarez, his neighbor 2 doors down, who watched Noah on the nights he worked. "He's out. Didn't fuss too bad. The little bear is on the couch if you want to grab it on your way in." Lucas typed back, "Thank you. I'll be home by 7. He stared at the phone for a second longer, then put it face down. Noah was 4. 4 years, 2 months, and 11 days. Lucas kept the count in his head the way other men kept baseball statistics. 4 years of formula bottles warmed in microwaves, of diapers in gas station bathrooms, of rocking a colicky baby in the front seat of a car because the apartment was too cold and the heater was broken and he didn't have the money to fix it. 4 years of learning what a pediatrician was and how insurance worked, and how to braid a tiny patch of hair back from a forehead that ran 103 degrees at 2 in the morning. 4 years alone. He didn't talk about Noah's mother. Not to Dale, not to Mrs. Alvarez, not to the small circle of gas station regulars who knew him by his first name. When people asked, he said she's not in the picture, in a voice that made them stop asking. It was the closest he came to a lie. She wasn't in the picture because Lucas had cut her out of it, and he'd done it for reasons he still woke up sweating about at 3 in the morning, sometimes. But that was a story for a different night. The trucker came back in, dropped a 20 on the counter for a pack of Marlboros and a coffee, and left without making eye contact. Lucas rang him up, handed him his change, and watched the taillights fade into the rain. Then it was quiet again. Just the hum of the coolers, the tick of the old clock above the cigarette rack, and the steady drumming of water on metal. Lucas picked up his book. He made it through 2 more chapters before he heard it. At first he thought it was thunder, but thunder didn't sound like that. like metal folding in on itself, a high, screaming tear of friction, and then a wet, heavy slam that vibrated up through the concrete floor into the soles of his boots. He was on his feet before he registered the decision to stand. The sound had come from the overpass, maybe 100 yards up the road, where Route 9 climbed over the old freight rail line. He hit the door at a run. The rain slapped him cold, soaked his shirt through in 3 strides. Out past the pumps, past the edge of the station's light, the overpass was a black silhouette against the gray-black sky. He could see a glow now, yellow and flickering, that hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. Headlights pointing the wrong direction. A car on its side, maybe. No, on its roof. He couldn't tell. The angles were wrong. He should have called 911. He knew that, in the back of his head, the part of him that knew procedure, that knew liability. Instead, his feet kept moving. Something in him had gone past thinking and into doing, and he'd learned a long time ago not to argue with that part of himself. He ran. The shoulder of the road was slick gravel turning to mud. He scrambled up the incline, slipping twice, his palms scraping raw against the wet asphalt. When he crested the top of the overpass, he saw it clearly. A silver sedan, one of those expensive German ones, had hit the guardrail hard enough to bend the steel outward into a ragged U. The front end was crushed into the driver's side, and the whole vehicle sat tilted, 2 wheels off the ground, the chassis groaning every time the wind pushed it. Steam rose from the hood. The driver's side airbag had deployed and deflated, a limp white flag against a shattered windshield. Glass everywhere, glinting in the headlights like broken teeth. And in the passenger seat, pinned against the window by the angle of the crash, a woman. Lucas reached the car in 4 long strides. He could see her through the cracked glass. Dark hair matted with something that wasn't just water, a pale cheek pressed against the window, one hand flat against it, the fingers twitching. She was conscious. Her eyes found his through the glass and widened, and something in them, not fear exactly, but a sharp, furious clarity, hit him like a punch. He yanked at the door handle. Locked or jammed. He couldn't tell. "Hey!" He banged the flat of his hand against the window, hard enough to sting. "Hey, can you hear me? Can you unlock it?" Her lips moved. He couldn't hear. "Lady, I need you to unlock the door. Can you move your hand to the lock? Just reach up. Yeah, just there." Her hand shook as she lifted it. He watched her fingers search along the door panel, find the button, press it. He heard the soft thunk of the lock releasing and pulled the handle again. The door gave an inch and caught. The frame was bent. He set his foot against the side panel and hauled on the handle with both hands and every pound of him, and the door shrieked open 4 more inches, then 6, then wide enough for him to get his arm in. The smell hit him. Gasoline, hot metal, perfume that had probably cost more than his rent, and blood. Not a lot of blood, but enough. A cut at her hairline was bleeding down the side of her face in a slow, dark line. "Okay," he said, and his voice came out steadier than he felt. "Okay, I'm going to get you out. What's your name?" "Iris." She said it like it was a chore to pronounce. Her voice was lower than he'd expected, a little raw. "Iris Hale. Iris, I'm Lucas. I'm going to reach across you and undo your seatbelt. Anything hurt bad? Neck, back?" "My..." She stopped, pressed her lips together, tried again. "Ankle, I think." "Okay, that's okay. Ankle we can work with." He leaned in, trying not to put his weight on her, and fumbled for the seatbelt clasp. It took him 2 tries. The buckle was bent. When it finally released, she slumped forward into him with a small, involuntary sound that wasn't quite a cry, and he caught her against his chest. Up close, she smelled like champagne and rain and faintly like fear. "On 3, he said. 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. He slid an arm under her knees, braced the other across her back, and lifted her out of the car in one long, unsteady motion. She was lighter than he expected. Whatever she was wearing, some kind of long dress, dark green, soaked through and torn at the hem, tangled around his arms. She made another of those small sounds as he cleared her from the door. Sorry, I got you." He started walking her down the slope, away from the car, away from the smell of gasoline that he'd been trying not to think about. His boots slid on the wet gravel, and he nearly went down once, caught himself on one knee, adjusted his grip on her, kept going. She had one arm around his neck now. The rain was running down his face into his eyes, and he couldn't wipe it away. "Someone's going to see the car," she said, close to his ear. Not a question. A statement, like she was running down a list. Probably. I need you to... She broke off, swallowed. I need you to take me somewhere, not a hospital. He stopped walking. They were maybe 30 feet from the wreck now, on the gravel shoulder, the gas station lights glowing yellow through the rain in the distance. He looked down at her. Her face was very close to his and very pale, a bruise already darkening under one eye. Up close he could see that her dress was not just expensive. It was the kind of expensive that meant something. Black tie expensive. The kind you wore when important people were watching you. There was a pearl in one ear and nothing in the other. She'd lost the second one somewhere. And her eyes, which he could now see were a gray-green color, were steady on his in a way that people whose heads had just been slammed against a car window usually could not manage. You need a hospital, he said. I need a ride. Lady, you're bleeding. It's a scalp wound. They bleed a lot. They're not serious. She said it like she'd had scalp wounds before. My ankle is sprained at worst. I can walk on it for 10 minutes. You just crashed your car. Yes, I'm aware. He almost laughed. It was an absurd thing to almost laugh at. A woman he was carrying down a wet road at 2:30 in the morning, rain in both their faces, her blood on his shirt. But there was something about the dry way she said it, the tired precision, that cracked something in him for a second. I'm calling an ambulance, he said. Please don't. You need... Lucas. She used his name. It stopped him. Please. I will pay you. Whatever you want. Take me somewhere with a door that locks, and I will pay you enough to not work at that gas station for a year. I'm not asking you to hide a body. I'm asking you for a ride. He stared at her. The rain came down. Somewhere behind them, a car's engine was ticking as it cooled. Up on the overpass, the sedan groaned against what was left of the guardrail. He should say no. Every sensible part of him was saying no in a loud, clear voice. Calling an ambulance was the right call. Calling the police was the right call. Getting her name, getting her insurance, getting this written down on a piece of paper so that nobody could come after him later and say he'd done something he hadn't. All of that was the right call. But he'd seen the way her hand was shaking, not from cold. He'd watched people be cold, and he'd watched people be afraid. And these were two different kinds of shaking. She was afraid of something, and it wasn't the car accident. I'm not taking your money, he said finally. Something shifted in her face. Then why? Because you look like you're going to argue with me for another 10 minutes, and I've got a 4-year-old expecting me home by 7. He started walking again, slower this time, angling toward the gas station. There's a back room. You can sit down. I'll look at your head, and then we're going to have a real conversation about what you want to do. She didn't answer, but she didn't argue either. She just let her head rest against his shoulder, and he could feel her breathing, faster than it should have been, controlled in a way that suggested she was working at it. By the time they reached the station door, his shirt was soaked through with rain and a little bit of her blood, and she had gone very quiet. He kicked the door open with his foot, because his hands were full, and carried her past the counter and through the employees-only door into the back room. The back room was a 10 by 12 square with a metal desk, a folding chair, a coffee maker that didn't work, and a small sofa that Dale had brought in from his house 3 years ago for reasons nobody could explain. The sofa was brown plaid. It was the ugliest piece of furniture Lucas had ever seen, and right now it was the best piece of furniture in the county. He set her down on it as carefully as he could. She hissed through her teeth when he jostled her ankle, then got herself back under control. Don't move, he said. Seriously, don't. He went to the front, flipped the deadbolt on the main door, turned the sign to closed. Dale would fire him if he found out. Dale would find out only if somebody complained, and at 2:40 in the morning on a Tuesday in a rainstorm, nobody was going to complain. He turned off the exterior fluorescence from the breaker panel in the hallway, because suddenly the idea of their silver sedan-shaped glow felt like a beacon for the wrong kind of attention. Then he went back to the back room. She was sitting up. In the overhead light, he could see her more clearly now. Late 20s, maybe 30, high cheekbones, a full mouth that was currently pressed into a hard line. The cut at her hairline had slowed to a seep. Her hair, which he suspected had been pinned up at some point in the evening, had half fallen around her shoulders in a dark tangle. She was holding her left ankle in both hands. First aid kit's under the desk, she said without looking up. How do you know that? Because every gas station on Earth has a first aid kit under the desk. He pulled it out. It was red plastic, cracked on one corner, mostly empty because most of the regulars had a tendency to help themselves to the Band-Aids, but there was a sealed gauze pad, a roll of medical tape, and a tiny bottle of antiseptic. He knelt in front of the couch. "I'm going to clean the cut on your head," he said. "It's going to sting." "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have." She looked at him then, sharp. He kept his face neutral and tore the gauze open. When he touched the alcohol to her scalp, she flinched but didn't make a sound. He worked carefully, wiping the blood out of her hair with slow strokes, the way he cleaned Noah's scraped knees. Up close, she didn't smell like blood. She smelled like something dark and green, some perfume that cost more than his car. "You're steady," she said after a minute. "What?" "Your hands. You're steady. I've had practice." "Doing what?" He didn't answer. He finished cleaning the cut, pressed the pad against it, taped it down. "Keep pressure on it for 5 minutes," he said, sitting back on his heels. "And let me see the ankle." She lifted the hem of her dress. It was a ridiculous dress for a car crash. Long and slim, and the color of pine trees with some kind of beading at the neckline, one thin strap torn. Her ankle was starting to swell, a blue-purple bloom above a delicate strap of a shoe. The shoe had cost, he thought, more than he made in a month. He took her foot in his hand. She drew a breath. "Can you flex it?" he said. She flexed. She winced. "Not broken," he said. "Probably. Sprained bad, though. You'll want to wrap it." "I don't suppose this fine facility has an ace bandage." "No, but we have medical tape and I've got a clean undershirt in my locker." Her mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're very prepared." "I'm a dad." That landed on her face in some way he couldn't name. She looked at him for a long beat, and then she looked away. He got the undershirt. He tore it into strips. He wrapped her ankle, not expertly, but not badly either, his fingers moving carefully around the swelling. The whole time she watched him, not his hands, his face. He felt it the way you feel a light on the back of your neck. When he was done, he sat back in the folding chair across from her. The clock above the desk read 2:58, rain still pounding. "Okay," he said. "Talk to me." "About what?" "About why you don't want an ambulance? Why you don't want police? Why a woman in a $10,000 dress was driving alone on Route 9 at 2 in the morning and wrapped her car around a guardrail?" "It was the road," she said. "The ice." "Sure. And the reason you don't want the accident on record?" She was quiet. She reached up and touched the gauze at her hairline, then let her hand fall. "Who did you think I was going to call?" he said, more gently. "When I ran up to the car. Your eyes. You looked at me like you thought I was somebody else." "I didn't." "You did." She was quiet again, longer this time. When she spoke, her voice was different, lower, tired. "I thought you might be one of them," she said. "One of who?" She looked at him, really looked at him, the way he'd looked at her, trying to figure out what kind of person she was dealing with. "Mr. Reed," she said, and he almost flinched because he hadn't told her his last name, and then he remembered that it was stitched on his shirt in red thread, Lucas, and the name tag on his chest that said Reed. "Mr. Reed, tell me honestly, do you know who I am?" "No." "You don't follow business news?" "I don't follow any news." "Lucky man." "Not really." She almost smiled then. It was a small thing, and it flickered and went out, but he saw it. "I'm going to use your phone," she said. "I'm going to make one call, if you'll let me, and then I'll be gone within an hour. You'll never see me again, and nothing about tonight will ever come back to you. I promise." Lucas thought about it, about the car on the overpass that somebody was going to notice any minute now, if they hadn't already. About the security camera above his counter, which he suddenly remembered and then, just as suddenly, remembered had been broken for 6 weeks, and Dale hadn't fixed it because Dale never fixed anything. About his kids sleeping in Mrs. Alvarez's spare room with a stuffed bear on the couch waiting for him. About the way this woman had said one of them like there was a them, and the way her hand had twitched on the car window in a pattern he recognized from his own history, from a version of himself he'd buried. "Use the landline set," he said. "The one behind the counter. Don't use your cell. If somebody's tracking it, you don't want them getting a ping off my tower." She went very still. "You understand what I just said," she said slowly. "That's not something most people would understand. I didn't always work nights at a gas station. He stood up. He offered her his hand. She looked at his hand for a long moment, and then she took it and pulled herself up onto her one good foot and leaned against him. And he walked her out to the phone behind the counter at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday, while the rain kept falling on Route 9 and the car on the overpass burned down slow to a wet, smoking ruin. Thus, she made one call. She spoke 4 sentences into the receiver in a voice that didn't sound anything like the one she'd used with him. It was crisp, cold, authoritative, the voice of a person used to being obeyed. He only caught pieces. "No, I don't care what he said. Marcus, listen to me. A blue sedan, unmarked, no driver you recognize at the end of Route 9 before the exit, 1 hour." Then she hung up. She turned and looked at him. Her ankle was bandaged with strips of his undershirt. There was still dried blood in her hair. She was standing behind a counter at a Shell station in her destroyed $5,000 gown, and somehow she had arranged her face into the expression of a woman sitting at a boardroom table. "An hour," she said. "Then I'm out of your life." "Fine. What do I owe you?" "I told you, nothing."
"Mr. Reed," she said it almost kindly, "people don't do things for nothing. Let me do this the way I know how. And I'm telling you, you don't owe me anything. I did what any person would do." "No." She shook her head. A strand of wet hair fell across her face, and she pushed it back with fingers that were steadier than they had been half an hour ago. "You did what almost no one would have done. I know the difference."
He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He made her sit back down on the sofa in the back room. He made her a cup of instant coffee in a paper cup because it was what he had, and she took it with both hands like it was important that her hands be occupied. They didn't talk much after that. She asked him one question: "How old is your son?" And he said 4, and she said something very quietly that he didn't catch. He didn't ask her to repeat it. The hour passed. At 4:03, headlights came up the road. Not the highway, the service road, and a dark blue sedan pulled up behind the station, out of view of the road, with the precision of someone who had done this before. She stood. She tested her weight on the ankle, grimaced, and then set her face into something unreadable. "Mr. Reed." "Yeah. I'm sorry about your shirt." "It's fine." "It isn't." She looked down at herself, at the ruin of her dress, and then back up at him. "None of this is fine, but you've been decent to me, and I won't forget it." "You don't have to remember it. Just get home safe." "Home." She said the word like it was in a language she didn't speak well. Then she nodded, once, sharp, the way you close a door. He helped her to the back. A man in a dark coat got out of the sedan and came around to open the passenger door. He didn't make eye contact with Lucas. He had the posture of somebody who'd spent time in a uniform once. Iris climbed in on her bad foot, slow, and the man closed the door behind her. For a half a second, through the glass, she looked back at him. Her face was unreadable. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't mouth anything. She just looked. Then the car pulled out, and the taillights went up the service road, and then they were gone. And Lucas Reed was standing in a wet T-shirt behind a gas station on Route 9 at 4 in the morning with a blood-stained shirt in his hand and no proof any of it had happened at all. He went back inside. He flipped the breaker. The fluorescents came back on. He unlocked the front door. He turned the closed sign to open. He walked into the back and he picked up the bald rag that had been his undershirt and the paper cup she'd left half full of instant coffee, and he threw them both in the trash. The gauze wrapper was still on the desk. He threw that out too. He stood in the middle of the little room, listening to the rain, and for the first time in a long time he let himself think, really think, about his old life, about the training, about the things he'd done in rooms not that different from this one, in countries he wasn't allowed to name, for a version of the United States government that had also never officially existed. About the day he'd walked away from all of it with a 1-year-old son on his hip, and a resignation that the man across the desk had accepted with a face like a closing vault. He hadn't recognized himself tonight. Not in the way he'd run up that embankment without thinking. Not in the way his hands had known exactly how to clean a scalp wound and wrap a sprained ankle. Not in the way he'd told her, without hesitation, which tower her cell phone would ping off. That man wasn't supposed to exist anymore. He'd buried him. And yet, Lucas took a long breath. He let it out. Then he picked up the phone and called his replacement, a kid named Jesse who worked the day shift, and said he was heading home early and Jesse could come in whenever. The register was balanced. He locked up. He drove home. The rain was letting up by the time he hit his street. Mrs. Alvarez answered the door in her housecoat, her hair in a long gray braid over one shoulder, and handed him a sleeping 4-year-old and a small brown bear without saying a word, because she'd been married to a trucker for 40 years before he died, and she knew when not to ask questions. Lucas carried Noah back to their apartment. He laid the boy down in the little bed with the blue sheets and tucked the bear in next to him and stood there for a long minute watching him breathe. Noah had his mother's eyelashes. It was the only thing of hers Lucas had let himself keep, and he hadn't had a choice. In the kitchen, he pulled off his soaked shirt and balled it up and shoved it deep into the trash under the coffee grounds. He'd buy another one. He had 4 more just like it. He stood at the sink and ran cold water over his hands and watched the pink wash off his knuckles down the drain. Somewhere out there, in a car he'd never see, going to a place he'd never know, a woman named Iris Hale was riding home with a bandaged ankle and a cut at her hairline and a dress that would be in a dumpster by morning. "You'll never see me again," she'd said. He believed her. He wanted to believe her. His life, the little one he'd built out of fluorescent lights and night shifts and the weight of a small boy in the mornings, that life had no room in it for a woman in a torn green dress and a voice used to being obeyed. He shut the water off. He dried his hands. He went down the hall to his own bedroom, which was really Noah's room with a second mattress in it, and he lay down in his jeans on top of the blankets and he closed his eyes. He didn't sleep. He lay there as the gray of morning came up in the window, and he listened to his son breathe in the other bed, and he thought about the way the woman had looked at him through the car window with her hand pressed flat against the glass, like she'd been expecting somebody. And he hadn't been who she expected, but he'd do. Outside, the rain finally stopped. A garbage truck came down the alley. A dog barked 2 blocks over. The world went on the way it always did, indifferent, loud, ordinary. Lucas Reed lay in the gray light with his eyes open and told himself again and again that by tomorrow night this would all feel like something he'd dreamed. He was wrong about that, but he didn't know it yet. He was wrong, and he found out 5 days later. The first 2 days after the accident, Lucas did what he always did. He worked Tuesday night and Wednesday night at the Shell, came home, slept in 2-hour shifts around Noah's schedule, walked the boy to the little daycare at the community center, picked him up at 4, cooked something out of a can, read him the book about the mouse and the moon 3 times because Noah wouldn't let him read anything else. Ordinary, loud, tiring ordinary. By Thursday morning, he'd almost convinced himself. Almost. Because on Wednesday night a tow truck had come for the sedan on the overpass, and the kid who'd driven it had stopped in for a coffee afterward, and Lucas had asked, casual, just a gas station guy making small talk, what happened to the driver. "Nobody in the car when we got there," the tow kid had said, shrugging, stirring 3 sugars into a black coffee. "Cops said maybe somebody pulled him out. Car was registered to some LLC, not a person. That's all I know, man." Lucas had nodded like it was an interesting story about somebody else and rung him up. And when the kid left, he'd stood at the counter for a full minute without moving. Registered to an LLC. People didn't register their personal cars to LLCs, not ordinary people. People who were trying to keep their names out of databases registered their cars to LLCs. He'd gone back to his book. By Thursday afternoon, though, the edge of it had started to soften. Noah had a fever. Just a low one, 100.1, probably a cold. And between ice pops and children's Tylenol and a humidifier that leaked, Lucas stopped thinking about a woman in a green dress. He thought about small feet, hot against his palm. He thought about his rent, which was due on the 1st. He thought about whether the car could make it another 3 months before the timing belt went. Friday he worked a day shift, covering for Jesse, whose girlfriend had gone into labor. He stood behind the counter in the watery morning light and sold lottery tickets to men in paint-spattered work clothes, and by Friday afternoon, Iris Hale felt like somebody he'd seen in a movie a long time ago. Saturday morning, he took Noah to the park. It was the first dry day in a week. The sky was still that washed-out pale color that followed a long rain, but the sun was actually out, and the grass in Benton Park was green-brown and spongy under their shoes. Noah was in rubber boots with frogs on them, and a coat 2 sizes too big because Lucas had bought it to last him through the winter. Lucas pushed him on the swing for a while, then let him run off to the little plastic climbing structure, and sat on a bench with a cup of bad coffee from the truck that parked by the baseball diamond on weekends. He was watching his son climb up the slide backwards. Noah had a whole theory about slides, which was that going up them was more interesting than going down, when a woman sat down on the other end of the bench. He didn't look over at first. It was a public bench. People sat on benches. Then she said, "He has your eyes." He went very still. She was wearing jeans, dark ones, expensive looking but unshowy, with a cream-colored sweater and a wool coat draped over her lap. No makeup he could see. Her hair was pulled back in a low knot. The cut at her hairline was healing, a thin red line still visible under the sweep of the hair. She had a walking boot on her left foot, the kind you got from an orthopedist, and she was holding a paper cup of coffee from the same bad truck. "Iris," he said. "Mr. Reed." "What are you doing here?" "Watching your son go up a slide backwards. He's very committed to it." "That's not—" "I know what you meant." She took a sip of her coffee. Her hand, he noticed, was not quite steady, and she was trying to hide that by holding the cup with both. "I asked a question of the wrong kind of person and got an address. I won't do it again. I'm sorry." "How did you—" "Mr. Reed, I run a company with 22,000 employees and contracts in 4 countries. It wasn't hard." He looked at her. Really looked, in daylight, for the first time. The bruise under her eye had turned green and yellow and was fading. She looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. Up close, without the rain and the blood and the dress, she was— He found he had to reach for the word, not beautiful exactly, but arresting. The kind of face you'd have to keep turning back to, because you couldn't quite decide what it was doing to you. "You told me I'd never see you again," he said. "I meant it. When I said it. What changed?" She didn't answer right away. She watched Noah for a minute. The boy had made it to the top of the slide and was now crouched up there, peering down at the steps like he was plotting something. "Does he talk much?" she asked. "Too much. Answer the question." "Mr. Reed." "Lucas. If we're going to do this, just— Lucas." "Lucas?" She nodded once, a small, formal gesture. "What changed is that I realized something on the drive home Tuesday night, something I'm still trying to make sense of. And the only person I could think of to talk to about it is a man I've spoken 600 words to in my entire life. That's not a good sign." "No, it isn't." Noah, at the top of the slide, let out a war whoop and hurled himself down it head first. Lucas was halfway off the bench before the boy's boots hit the mulch, laughing, unharmed. He settled back down, heart in his throat. "He does that about 40 times a day," Lucas said. "Does he have a helmet?" "He lost it. He lost a helmet." "He's 4. Everything lost by a 4-year-old is lost forever. It's a rule." A ghost of something crossed her face. Not a smile, but the cousin of one. Then it was gone. "I need your help," she said. "No." "You don't know what I'm going to—" "Iris?" She stopped. The fact that he'd used her first name seemed to surprise her. Surprised him too. He hadn't planned to. "Whatever it is," he said, "the answer is no. I have a kid. I work at a gas station. I'm not— Whatever you think I am, whatever you figured out about me on Tuesday night, that's not what I am anymore. I made a choice. I live with it. I'm not asking you to be who you were. Then what? I'm asking you to be who you were on Tuesday night, for 1 week, maybe 2. He turned to look at her fully for the first time. She was looking straight ahead, watching Noah, and he could see the profile of her jaw working. "Someone is trying to take my company from me," she said quietly. "Not buy it. Take it. They've been building a case for 8 months, and I didn't see it because I was too busy running the business. Now they're almost ready to move. 2 weeks from Tuesday, there's a board meeting. If I walk into that room without proof of what they've been doing, I walk out of it no longer the CEO. That's a problem for lawyers. I have lawyers. I have 12 lawyers. They're very good. Then, the evidence they're using is fabricated, financial records, wire transfers that didn't happen, meetings I didn't take, but they've built it with the kind of care that makes it look real to anyone who doesn't know exactly where to push. My lawyers can't find the seam, because they're lawyers." She turned to him. Her eyes were very direct. "You," she said, "are not a lawyer. I'm a father. I'm not asking you to do anything dangerous. I'm asking you to look at documents, pattern recognition. Things ordinary investigators would miss. A few nights, paid, and when it's over, I disappear again. For real, this time. Lucas watched his son. Noah had given up on the slide and was now engaged in a deeply serious conversation with a dandelion.
Why me? He said finally. There are people in this country who do this work for a living.
People with badges, people with clearances. You've got the money to hire any of them. Because I don't know who's in it. He looked over. The people trying to push me out, she said, are people I've trusted for years. One of them I've known since I was 19. If I bring in anyone connected to the security world, anyone with a firm name, a license number, a registered office, there is a non-zero chance it gets back to them within 48 hours. I need someone outside the map. And on Tuesday night, Mr. Reed, Lucas, you were the most outside the map person I'd ever met. You knew what a cell tower ping was. You ran toward a wreck instead of away from one. You didn't take my money, and you haven't in 5 days called a single journalist.
I wouldn't do that.
I know. I had someone check. He laughed. It wasn't a real laugh, but it was close.
Of course you did. I had to. Yeah, you did. That's how that works. They sat for a moment. Somewhere a dog was barking. Noah had moved on from the dandelion to a cluster of pigeons, which he was trying to direct with hand signals, as if they were a tiny feathered orchestra. What's his name? Iris said. Noah. Noah.
I'm not a bodyguard, Iris. I'm not an investigator. What I was, a long time ago, was a person who did specific jobs for a specific organization. I'm not that person anymore. I don't have the access. I don't have the contacts. I don't have anything.
You have eyes, she said. You have a pattern-matching brain that spent, 6 years? 8?
Looking at documents for things that didn't add up. And whatever you did at the end that made you walk away, I'm not asking you to do that again. I'm asking you to read spreadsheets. In a hotel room, with the door locked, for money that fixes whatever it is you worry about when you lie awake at night. He turned his head. Don't, he said. Don't what? Don't do the thing where you pretend to know what I worry about. I don't have to pretend. You worry about him. She didn't look at Noah, but she didn't need to. You worry about the rent. You worry about the timing belt on your car. I saw it sitting in the lot. I worry about a company. You worry about a kid. I'd rather have your kind of worry for what it's worth. I've been on both sides. He was quiet for a long time. What's the money? He said finally. He hated himself for asking. He asked anyway. 75,000 for up to 3 weeks. If it finishes sooner, still 75. Cash or wired, whichever you prefer, to an account of your choice. That's a lot of money for reading spreadsheets. I'm paying for discretion and an hourly rate that reflects what you're actually worth, which is not $13.50. I'm also paying for risk. I'm not going to pretend there's no risk. The risk is low. It's not zero. How low is low? Low enough that I wouldn't be sitting next to you in a public park if I thought anyone was following me right now. High enough that I'm not going to lie to your face about it. He breathed out through his nose. You'd stay at my place? He said. Or,
no. She shook her head. You come to me. When you can. When he's at daycare. At night when he sleeps. Whatever works. I've taken a furnished unit across the river in Riverside. Nothing in my name. You'd never be seen entering or leaving. And whatever you do, whatever you find, stays in that apartment. No paper trail to your home. No device I give you crosses the threshold of where he sleeps. Non-negotiable, from my side. He looked at her. She'd thought about this. Not in the way of a person making a pitch. In the way of a person who'd gone down each branch of the thing and cut off the ones that ended badly. For his sake. Not just hers. It bothered him how much that mattered. I need to think, he said. Of course. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small flip phone, the kind that came free with certain plans or that you bought for cash at a convenience store. She set it on the bench between them. If the answer is yes, she said, turn it on and press the one. It only calls me. It doesn't do anything else. If the answer is no, leave it in a drawer and don't turn it on and I will understand. I won't come back. You have my word. Your word. For what it's worth. I don't know what it's worth yet. Fair. She stood up slowly, careful of the boot. She looked across the playground at Noah, who was now on his back in the mulch, staring up at the sky, having apparently exhausted the pigeons. He's a very earnest little person, she said. Yeah, he is. I hope you say no, Lucas. He looked up. I mean it, she said. I hope you look at that phone and you leave it in a drawer, because the world I live in eats people, and I'd rather you keep your life the way it is than get pulled into mine. If I thought I had another option, I wouldn't be here. I want you to know that. I want you to know I know what I'm asking. He didn't answer. He didn't know how to. She nodded to him once, the way she'd nodded from the back of the blue sedan, and then she turned and walked, slow on the boot, toward the parking lot. He watched her go. She didn't look back this time. Noah came running up, mulch in his hair. Who was that lady? Just somebody I met. She had a boot like the one you had when you hurt your foot. Yeah. She looked sad. Did she? A little. Noah considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. Can I have fruit snacks?
In a minute. Go get your hat. Lucas sat on the bench until Noah was out of earshot. Then he picked up the flip phone and weighed it in his palm. It was lighter than it had any right to be. He thought about the sentence $75,000. He thought about the timing belt and the winter coat, and the day 2 months ago when he'd stood in the grocery store with $41 in his account and done the math on cereal versus milk. He thought about a fabricated ledger, pattern recognition, a hotel room with the door locked. He thought about the way her hand had shook around the paper cup of coffee because she was afraid, and she wasn't a woman who was accustomed to being afraid. He put the phone in his pocket. That night, after Noah fell asleep with the brown bear under his chin, Lucas sat at the kitchen table in the dark and turned the phone over in his hands for 40 minutes. He didn't turn it on. He thought about the man he'd buried. He thought about the money. He thought about how long it had been since he'd done anything that mattered, and hated himself for how much that thought meant to him. It wasn't a good reason. It was, in fact, the exact kind of reason that got people killed. His old instructor, a man named Royce, who died of a heart attack in a Sarasota diner 4 years ago, had told him once, "The dangerous guys aren't the ones who want the money. They're the ones who want to feel useful. The money you can budget. Usefulness will bleed you out." Lucas had nodded back then. 26 years old and indestructible. Now he was 32, and the only thing in the world he couldn't replace was asleep 20 feet away with a stuffed bear under his chin, and a woman with a voice like cold glass had offered him $75,000 to look at spreadsheets. He turned the phone on. He pressed the 1. She picked up on the second ring. "Lucas, I have 3 conditions." "All right." 1. I never give you an address you don't already have. You know where I work. You know where my kid goes to daycare. I want a promise, on whatever your word is worth, that nobody associated with you ever goes near either. Ever. Not to watch, not to check, not to protect. Nobody. Agreed. 2. Anytime I say stop, we stop. I walk away with what you've paid me to that point. No argument, no guilt trip, no Lucas, just one more night. Agreed. 3. He paused. This was the one he'd thought about longest. If it gets hot, if it stops being spreadsheets, you tell me. The second it changes, not an hour later, not when you have it figured out. The second. Agreed. You agreed to that fast, because I'd have told you anyway. Her voice was steady. I'm not going to use you, Lucas. I'm going to employ you. There's a difference. There'd better be. When can you start? He looked at the door of Noah's room, at the thin strip of nightlight bleeding out from under it. Monday night, he said. 10 p.m. Text me the address on this phone. Done. A pause. Lucas? Yeah. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You don't know if I'm any good at this. I know. How? Because on Tuesday night I watched you wrap my ankle the way a person who'd done it in the dark, under fire, would wrap an ankle. I've been in rooms with men who'd done that. You have the same hands. He didn't know what to say to that. He hung up. He sat at the table for a long time. Well, the apartment in Riverside was on the 8th floor of a glass-fronted building that catered to medical residents and visiting executives. You needed a key fob to get past the lobby. Lucas got buzzed in through a service entrance, took the freight elevator to 8, and walked down a carpeted hallway that smelled faintly of dryer sheets. Unit 812. He knocked twice, paused, knocked once. She told him the pattern on the phone. old habits. His, apparently, and hers. She opened the door in a black sweater and dark slacks, no shoes, the walking boot gone. She had reading glasses pushed up on top of her head. "You're 4 minutes late," she said. "Bus." "You took a bus here." "2 buses, and a 15-minute walk. I'm not driving my car to this address." Something that wasn't quite a smile flickered across her face. "Come in." The apartment was clean and anonymous in the way high-end rentals always were. Gray couch, a framed print of a city that was not this city. A kitchen island. What caught his eye was the dining table, which had been turned into a workspace. 3 laptops, 2 external monitors, a stack of banker's boxes filled with paper, and a bowl of almonds that had clearly been a gesture at food and was now mostly empty shells. "You eaten?" he said. "Today?" "Yes." "What?" "An almond." "That's not—" "Lucas, not tonight." "Fine." He took off his jacket. "Show me what we're looking at." She sat him down at the table. She pulled a chair up beside him, not across, beside, close enough that their shoulders could bump, and opened the first laptop. "Hale Dynamics," she said, "founded by my grandfather. Industrial manufacturing at first, then defense subcontracting, then the last 20 years we've diversified into logistics and software. My father ran it until his heart went 3 years ago. I took over. I was 30. Most of the board thought I was a placeholder. They assumed my uncle would run things from the side and I'd cut ribbons. He doesn't." "No." Her jaw set. "He doesn't, but he's never forgiven me for it." "Your uncle." "Gregory Hale, my father's younger brother. He's the chair of the audit committee. He was, the person I trusted most in that room." "Was." 8 months ago," she said, "a whistleblower tip was anonymously filed with the SEC. Allegations that I'd been running payments through a shell in Luxembourg, that I'd been personally enriching myself off a defense contract with a NATO ally, that the company's books had been doctored to conceal it. The filing triggered a preliminary inquiry. My lawyers handled it. The inquiry was closed." "Okay." 3 months ago, a second filing went in. Different angle, different documents. This one got further. My general counsel flagged it to me. I brought in outside forensic accountants, and we traced the allegations back to internal documents that only certain people would have access to. "Who?" 7 people, 5 of whom have worked for the company for over 2 decades. One is a junior associate who started last summer. And Gregory. So 6 suspects and a kid. Essentially, the internal forensic team cleared 4 of the 5 senior people. I personally cleared the junior associate. She was in Seoul the week the documents were created. That leaves 2. Gregory and who? Ethan Walsh, Chief Financial Officer. He's been at Hale Dynamics for 26 years. He was at my father's funeral. Her voice went flat. "He was at my wedding." Lucas looked up. "You're married." "Was. It didn't take 2 years. We shouldn't have. It's not relevant." "Noted." She went on faster. "In 4 days, the board convenes to review the findings of an independent investigator they retained. The investigator's report will formally recommend that I step down pending a full review. Once that recommendation is on the table, a simple majority of the board can suspend me with cause. 6 votes. I have 4 solid. Gregory has 4 solid. The swing votes are 2 members who are technically neutral, but who have been having an awful lot of dinners with my uncle lately. So you're walking in down 2. I'm walking in down 2 unless I can walk in with the real story. Not denials, not counter-accusations. The real story. Who did it, how they did it, and proof. In 4 days. In 4 days. He whistled low. "Yeah," she said. "Show me the documents." She did. They worked until 3 in the morning that first night. Lucas was rusty. He hadn't looked at anything like this in 6 years, but the shape of it came back faster than he wanted it to. The boxes were organized by fiscal quarter, and he started there, pulling at threads, looking not for the smoking gun she'd already gone after, but for the small things, the things nobody careful enough to fake a Luxembourg shell would bother to fake. Meal receipts, travel logs, gas stops on corporate cards, the little pebbles that told you where a person had actually been. Around 1, he got up to stretch and realized she hadn't said anything in 40 minutes. She was at the other end of the table with her head in her hands, staring at a page. "Hey," he said. She looked up. You need to eat something. I'm fine. You're going to be useless to me in 3 hours if you don't. Do you have anything? There's... in the fridge. There's some things. Angela stocked it. Who's Angela? My assistant. The only person who knows I'm here. The one person who knows you're here is a person who knows you're here. Angela has worked for me for 11 years, and she's godmother to a child I don't have yet. And if you suggest she's a problem, I'm going to throw this stapler at your head. He held up his hands. Fine. Fine. I'll make you a sandwich. He made her a sandwich. Turkey, cheese, tomato, on bread that was nicer than any bread he'd ever eaten. He put it on a plate. He set the plate next to her on the table. She looked at it for a long moment, like she was trying to remember what food was, and then she picked it up and ate half of it in what seemed to be 3 bites. Slow down, he said. Jesus. I forgot I was hungry. Yeah, I noticed. She chewed. She swallowed. She looked at him. Does he eat well? She said. Who, Noah? Off and on. He's 4. Monday he only eats yogurt. Tuesday he won't touch yogurt. It's like negotiating with a drunk. A small laugh escaped her, a real one this time, short and surprised, and she put her hand up to her mouth like she wanted to catch it and put it back. You don't do that very often, do you? Lucas said. Do what? Laugh. I used to. He let that sit. He went back to his pile. He came back Tuesday night, and Wednesday, and Thursday. By Thursday, he had found the first real thing. Ethan Walsh's corporate card showed a fuel purchase at a gas station in Annapolis, Maryland at 8:47 a.m. on March 14th. 12 minutes later, a document had been uploaded to the Hail Dynamics secure server from an IP address that resolved to Annapolis. The document was a falsified wire transfer confirmation, one of the core pieces of evidence the SEC filing rested on. The trouble was, on March 14th, Ethan Walsh was in a board meeting in Chicago. There was video of it. He'd asked 2 questions. Someone else used his card, Iris said, flat, staring at the timeline Lucas had laid out in front of her. Someone who had access to his corporate card and to the Hail Dynamics server and to his login credentials, and who was in Annapolis on March 14th. She sat back. She rubbed her eyes with the heels of her hands, and when she lowered them, there was something different on her face, something hard. Gregory has a weekend house in Annapolis, she said. Yeah, Lucas said. I kind of figured he might. Ethan and Gregory have been friends for 30 years. Yeah. Gregory wanted it to look like Ethan, she said. He wanted a scapegoat he could throw to the wolves if anything came out. A loyal old friend who'd quietly take a package and retire, no questions asked. And I was supposed to be collateral damage, and if too much came out, Ethan takes the fall, Gregory takes the company, and nobody notices that it was the wrong man in the corner. Yeah. She was very still. Lucas. Yeah. I'm going to need you to do one more thing. Oh boy. It's the last one. And then I pay you and you walk away, just like we said. Tell me what it is first. She told him. She needed confirmation. Not a timeline, not an inference. Confirmation. A document, an email, a file, something that put Gregory's hand on the actual pen. She had all the pieces around the edges, but without the center, she was going to walk into that board meeting Monday morning with a story, not a case, and her uncle would laugh her out of the room. She needed one real thing, and she knew where it was. Gregory kept a personal laptop at his Annapolis house. He did his private work on it. He was 64 years old. He didn't trust cloud services, and he was convinced that a machine he only used in a house he only visited on weekends was the safest place in the world for certain kinds of records. Iris knew this because 15 years ago, when she was a college sophomore, he'd taken her up there for a weekend and, drunk on a bottle of Burgundy, he'd shown her the laptop and told her with a sort of boyish pride that this was where he kept the real stuff. You want me to break into your uncle's house, Lucas said. No. Oh, good. I want you to come with me while I go into my uncle's house. I have a key. The alarm code. I'm family. I'm allowed to be there. I'll take responsibility for everything. I just need someone with me who can do what you can do. Pull what's on the machine without tripping anything. Leave it the way we found it. Know what to do if something goes wrong. Iris? Lucas. This is the thing I said. Friday in the park. This is the thing I said I wouldn't do. I know. You agreed to conditions. I know. And you're asking anyway. Yes. He looked at her across the table. She looked back. She had circles under her eyes the color of a fresh bruise. Her hair was a mess. Her mouth was set.
I'm asking anyway, she said quieter. And if you say no, I'll go alone. I'm telling you that so you know you're not the thing that makes this happen or doesn't happen. I'm doing it Saturday night either way. I'd rather not do it alone. That's all. Lucas closed the folder in front of him. He stared at the closed folder for a long time. He thought about Noah. He thought about the brown bear on the couch. He thought about the sentence, I'm doing it Saturday night either way, and the way she'd said it, not as a manipulation, he was pretty sure, but as a fact, as the kind of thing she said to herself in the bathroom mirror when nobody was watching. Saturday night, he said. Saturday night. I drive, and I pick the route, and if I say we leave, we leave. Yes. And if I see anything, I don't like when we get there. We don't go in. We turn around and we find another way. Yes. And after this, I'm done. Whether it works or it doesn't, whatever happens on that laptop. After Saturday, you pay me, and I go home to my kid and I never hear from you again. A pause. The smallest pause. Yes, she said. She looked down at her hands. Her fingers were laced together on the table, and the knuckles were white. Lucas. Yeah. If something goes wrong on Saturday. She didn't look up. If anything happens to me, Angela knows to go to Marcus with everything. Marcus is the man who picked me up at the gas station. He'll take care of it. He'll make sure nothing in any of this ever touches you. Your name doesn't appear in a single document here. I've seen to that. I'm telling you so that if you need to walk out of here right now, you can, and you'll be fine. I'll still pay you. I'll wire it tonight. Iris, I need you to know I thought about it. I can tell. I needed you to know. He looked at the top of her head, at the thin red line at her hairline that was a week and a half old now and starting to fade. He didn't know when it had happened, the thing he didn't want to name. Maybe Tuesday at the gas station when she'd set a scalp wound. They bleed a lot like she was tired and not afraid, even though she'd been both. Maybe Friday on the bench when she'd said she hoped he'd say no. Maybe the moment he'd watched her eat half a turkey sandwich in 3 bites because she'd been forgetting meals. Somewhere in there, it had stopped being about $75,000 and the timing belt. Somewhere in there, he had started wanting, in a way he hadn't wanted anything in years, for this woman not to lose. He wasn't going to tell her that. He wasn't going to tell himself that very loudly either. Saturday night, he said. 8 o'clock. I'll be downstairs in a rental. She nodded, once. He got his jacket. He went to the door. Lucas. He stopped, hand on the handle. Yeah. Is Noah? She stopped. She seemed to be trying to figure out how to ask something. Does he have somebody for the weekend? If we're driving to Annapolis, Mrs. Alvarez. Okay. Why? No reason. Iris? She was looking at the table. There's a fund, she said, to the grain of the wood. It's already set up. It's in a name that isn't yours or his. If anything happens to you Saturday because of something I brought into your life, there's enough there to raise him. College, all of it. Angela knows, that's all. I wasn't going to say, but I wanted you to know. He stood with his hand on the door. He didn't trust himself to speak for a second. That's a hell of a thing to drop on a man on his way out, he said, finally. I know. I'll see you Saturday. He opened the door and he left, and he walked down the carpeted hallway, and the freight elevator, and the service entrance, and the 2 buses home. And when he got to his apartment and unlocked the door, he stood in the dark of the living room for a long time, listening to his son breathe in the other room. He had 4 days. He thought about the fun she hadn't needed to mention. He thought about the fact that she had. He thought about a 64-year-old man at a weekend house in Annapolis with a laptop in a drawer who did not know that on Saturday night, a woman in a walking boot and a man in a borrowed jacket were going to drive up his gravel driveway with the alarm code. He went into Noah's room. He sat on the edge of the bed. He watched the boy sleep. He put a hand on the small back under the blanket and felt it rise and fall. I'll be back Sunday morning, bud, he said very quietly. I promise.
Noah didn't wake up. He just sighed a small, deep sigh and turned his face into the pillow, and Lucas sat there in the dark until the first gray light came up in the window, and then he went to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee and started planning the drive. The planning took him 3 days. By Friday evening, he had a rental car reserved under the name of a cousin who owed him a favor and who didn't ask questions. He had 2 prepaid phones, a roll of electrical tape, a small zippered kit of tools he hadn't touched in 6 years and had kept, against his better judgment, in a shoebox at the back of his closet. He had a map of the Annapolis roads printed on paper, because paper didn't ping off towers. He had studied the satellite view of Gregory Hale's weekend house until he could have walked its footprint in the dark. Long gravel driveway off Severn Road, the kind that crunched loud under a tire, a dock out back with a boathouse, 2 exterior cameras at the front gate that he'd counted from the listing photos on the real estate history, and possibly a third he couldn't confirm. He'd told Mrs. Alvarez he was driving to Pittsburgh to see a friend who'd had surgery. She'd looked at him in that way she had, where she didn't ask and didn't believe him and didn't particularly care, and she'd said Noah will be fine. You bring yourself back in one piece, and he'd kissed Noah on the forehead Saturday morning and handed him the brown bear and said, I love you, bud. Be good for Mrs. A. And Noah had said, I love you back, Daddy. Bring me something. And Lucas had said he would. And he'd walked out to the rental without looking back because if he looked back, he would have stayed. He picked Iris up at 8 o'clock on the dot. She came out of the service entrance of the building in Riverside in jeans, a black long-sleeved shirt, a dark jacket, running shoes. No jewelry, hair pulled back tight. She had a small backpack over one shoulder. The walking boot was gone. She was limping very faintly on the ankle, but trying not to. She slid into the passenger seat and closed the door. You sleep? He said. Some? Liar? Some. He put the car in gear. They drove in silence for the first 20 minutes. He took surface streets out of the city, then got on the highway heading south, staying in the right lane, 5 miles over the limit. Nothing to notice. The radio was off. The heater ticked. Outside, the dark came down early the way it did in November, and the world reduced itself to 2 lanes of asphalt and red taillights. Around mile 40, she spoke. What did you tell him? What? Your son, about tonight, that I was driving to see a friend in Pittsburgh. Does he believe you? He's 4. He believes everything I say. That's the part I try not to think about. She was quiet a minute. My father used to lie to me, she said, about business trips, when I was small. He'd say he was going to visit a sick aunt, and I'd find out years later that there was no aunt. He was in Frankfurt negotiating a contract. It wasn't malicious. It was just his way of keeping it separate. The work. From me.
Did it work? No. She looked out the window. I was smart. I could tell when he was lying, and I decided when I was 10 or 11 that I was going to go into the business partly so he'd stop. Did that work? A small breath that was almost a laugh. No. He drove. You don't have to lie to him, she said, if you don't want to. I was going to say it like advice, but I'm not sure I'm the person to be giving you advice about fathers. I'll tell him the truth someday. Some version of it. When he's old enough to hear a version. And when will that be? I don't know. Later than I probably think. She nodded and didn't push, and Lucas felt, not for the first time in the past week, a strange, small, grateful thing in his chest at the way she knew when to stop. Most people didn't. Most people, when you gave them an inch of your life, took the mile. Iris Hale took the inch, and she put it down carefully, and she didn't reach for more. They reached the turn for Severn Road at 10 past 10. He killed the headlights a quarter mile before the house and pulled off onto a dirt pull-off he'd scouted on satellite, behind a stand of pines. He shut the engine. The quiet was huge and black and full of insects. Okay, he said. Run me through it one more time. Alarm code 492701. Keys in the, not the house, your uncle. He's at a fundraiser in Georgetown until midnight. He'll stay overnight at his apartment in D.C., not here. He doesn't come up to Annapolis on weekends in November. The caretaker couple, the Millers, live in the cottage by the road. Their lights go off by 9:30. They don't walk the grounds. The security system is zoned. The main house zone is separate from the boathouse zone. We're not touching the boathouse. Cameras.
Front gate has two. A third at the back door of the main house. None inside because Gregory doesn't trust clouds and he doesn't want recordings of himself. The front gate cameras are motion activated, but the feed goes to a DVR in his study, not to any third-party service. No cell modem. It's an old system. That's what you remember. It's what I've checked. Angela had a security consultant walk the property last year under the cover of an insurance review. I have the report. You had a security consultant case your uncle's house. I had a security consultant review my family's properties after my father died. Gregory's was one of 4. Okay, he breathed out. Okay, he said again. He reached into the back seat and pulled a small black duffel into his lap. He unzipped it. He took out a pair of thin leather gloves and put them on. He handed her a pair, and she put them on too. He took out a small headlamp, a red lens over the bulb. He handed her a second one. He took out a small black device about the size of a deck of cards, with 2 short wires coming off one end. What's that? She said. It's what's going to let me image the drive without having to take it with us, or boot the machine in a way that leaves a log. I thought you were rusty. I am. Royce made me keep this. He said the day would come I'd need it. I thought he was being sentimental. Royce. Man who trained me. He died. Sorry. It was a good death. Diner in Sarasota. Heart gave out between the eggs and the toast. We should all be so lucky. He zipped the bag. He put it over his shoulder. They walked. The gravel of the driveway was loud even at a walking pace, so they stayed off it, moving along the grass verge where the ground was soft with fallen pine needles. The house appeared through the trees in pieces. A roof line, a gable, a dark slate of windows that caught the slight moonlight. It was bigger than it had looked in the satellite photo. It was a lot bigger. Stone, with a wide stone porch, a turret on one side, a slate roof. The kind of house that had been called a cottage in 1910, by people for whom a cottage was the thing you had when you didn't feel like using one of the real houses. The caretaker's cottage off to the left was dark. 2 upstairs windows glowed faintly with the flicker of a TV. They skirted the front of the house, crossed through a line of hydrangea, came around to the back. A stone terrace, a long, dark swimming pool covered for the winter. A set of French doors. Iris knelt by a planter. She tipped the pot. She slid a brass key out from a small magnetic box taped to the underside. Really, Lucas said. I know. You people. I know, Lucas. She unlocked the French doors. The alarm panel was just inside, a soft beeping in the dark. She punched in the code. The beeping stopped. They were in. The house smelled like old wood and furniture polish, and a little bit like a cigar somebody had smoked a week ago. The French doors opened into a library that ran the width of the back of the house. Bookshelves to the ceiling, a pair of wingback chairs, a fireplace laid with logs that hadn't been lit, a big mahogany desk at one end. Study's upstairs, Iris whispered. He works in the study. Lead. She led. They went up a back staircase that creaked twice, and each time they froze and listened for a 10 count before they moved again. At the top, a long carpeted hallway. She turned right, past 2 closed bedroom doors, to a set of double doors at the end. The study was what the library downstairs was pretending not to be. The real one. Oriental rug, a heavy desk, a leather club chair, an old globe on a stand. A framed photograph on the desk showed a young Gregory Hale and a man who Lucas assumed was Iris's father, both in tuxedos, both grinning, arms around each other's shoulders. Iris looked at the photograph for half a second and then looked away. Where's the laptop? Lucas said. The bottom drawer on the left. It's locked, but he keeps the key in the pen cup on the top. He keeps the key for a locked drawer and a pen cup on the same desk. He's 64 years old and he's never been robbed, Lucas. That's going to change. The key was in the pen cup. The drawer opened. Inside was a silver laptop, a charger, and a small external hard drive the size of a pack of cards. Bingo, Lucas said quietly. He pulled both out. He set the laptop on the desk, opened it. The screen lit up with a login box. He didn't touch the login. Instead, he plugged the little black device into one of the USB ports on the side, flipped a switch on it, and waited. A small green LED came on, then a small blue one. What is it doing? Iris said, telling the machine it's a keyboard and a mass storage device at the same time. In about 90 seconds, it'll have a full image of the drive. We won't boot the operating system. It'll never know we were here. And the external? Same thing, one at a time. That one's probably just files. It'll be faster. They stood in the dark of the study. He watched the LEDs. Iris stood very still next to him, arms crossed, breath shallow. The clock on the mantel ticked. Somewhere below them, the house made a small settling sound and they both flinched. "Talk to me," she said quietly. "About what?" "Anything. I'm going to lose my mind standing here." He kept his eyes on the LEDs. "Noah had a nightmare Thursday night," he said. "He dreamed there was a crocodile in the closet." "A crocodile?" "Specifically a crocodile, not an alligator." He was very firm about it. "What did you do?" "I opened the closet. I told the crocodile he wasn't welcome. I closed the closet. And that worked. For about 45 seconds. Then he said he could still hear it breathing. I had to get the flashlight and do a second pass, talk to it more sternly." A tiny laugh from her, in the dark. "I had a lamp in my closet when I was small," she said. "A nightlight shaped like a mushroom. I thought it was a person. Every night for a year I thought there was a small glowing person in my closet watching me sleep." "Did anybody tell you it was a lamp?" "Eventually. My father finally went in and held it up and said, 'Iris, this is a lamp.' And I was so embarrassed I cried." "How old were you?" 6. "At 6, a small glowing person in the closet sounds pretty reasonable." "It does, doesn't it?" The first LED blinked from steady blue to steady green. "Main drive's done," Lucas said. "External next." He swapped the wires over. The little device did its quiet work. Outside, somewhere, a car went by on Severn Road, slow, and they both stopped talking and listened to it until the engine faded away into nothing. "I've been thinking about something," she said, when it was quiet again. "Yeah, when this is over, when I walk into that room Monday and put it all on the table, whatever happens, win or lose. Yeah. I'm not going to be the same afterward. I can feel it. I don't know what I mean by that yet, but I can feel it." He kept his eyes on the LEDs. "You've been alone a long time," he said. He didn't know where the sentence came from. He said it anyway. "Yes. That's something I know a little about." "I know you do. You get used to it. It's not even that bad. After a while, you mostly notice when it stops, not when it's happening." "When did yours stop?" "Noah. The day he was born. I didn't even know I'd been alone until I wasn't." Lucas. "Yeah. I'm going to owe you more than $75,000 before this is over." "No." "Yes." "No, Iris. I took the job. Whatever else this is, whatever else happens, that was the deal. You don't owe me." "Stop." He stopped. "Just stop," she said. "I'm not offering you money. Don't do the thing where you get cold because you don't know what to do with what I'm saying." He breathed out. "I don't know what to do with what you're saying," he said. "You're right. Okay? Okay?" The second LED went green. "We're done," he said. He unplugged the device. He put the laptop back in the drawer the way it had been. He put the hard drive back. He closed the drawer, turned the key in the lock, returned the key to the pen cup, lined it up exactly the way it had been. He stepped back. He took one long look at the desk, at the room, checking for anything out of place, and then he nodded. They went back down the hall, down the stairs, through the library, out the French doors. Iris armed the alarm. Iris locked the door. She slid the key into the magnetic box. She set the box back under the lip of the planter. They walked back through the hydrangeas, along the grass verge, to the car. When the doors were closed, he realized his hands were shaking. He hadn't noticed until now. "Hey," Iris said. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I noticed." "Breathe." "I am breathing." "Breathe slower." He breathed slower. The shake receded. He hadn't done anything like that in a very long time. It was one thing to remember that you knew how to do it. It was another to have your body remember that it remembered. He started the car. He pulled out onto Severn Road. He kept the lights off for the first half mile. It was almost midnight. They had what they'd come for. Nobody had seen them. Nobody was going to see them, except that 4 miles up the road, as he came around a long curve with his headlights now back on, A pair of headlights came on behind him where there hadn't been any. Just the headlights. No blue, no red. Just a car that had been sitting dark on the shoulder and had waited until he passed to fall in behind him. He watched them in the mirror. Iris? What? Don't turn around. There's a car behind us. It just came out of nowhere. She didn't turn around. She said, very calmly, how far back? Maybe 40 yards, matching speed. Are you sure it's... I'm sure. They drove for another minute. The car stayed 40 yards back, exactly 40 yards, the way a trained person would. Okay, Lucas said. Here's what we're going to do. What? I'm going to take the next right. If they take the next right, we have a problem. If they don't, we don't. Okay? The next right was a side road, barely paved, leading off into a stretch of dark pine. He took it without signaling. He slowed. He watched the mirror. The headlights behind him slowed. The headlights behind him took the right. Okay, he said. We have a problem. She went very quiet. Iris, listen to me. We are not going to the freeway. We are not going back the way we came. I need you to open the glove box. She opened it. There's a map, paper map. Pull it out. She pulled it out. Open it to Anne Arundel County. She opened it. She had the little red headlamp on low and was running her finger down the folds. I need a route with at least 3 turns in the next 2 miles. Not highway, surface. I want to see if they follow me through 3 turns. If they do, they're ours, and we stop playing. There's a road that loops back along the water. It's called Quarry Cove Road, about 1.5 miles. Take me there. She navigated. He drove. He kept his speed steady. He did not look at the mirror every time he wanted to, which was constantly. They made the first turn. The headlights turned. They made the second. The headlights turned. Jesus, Iris whispered. Third one. The third turn was onto Quarry Cove Road, a single-lane road that ran between a low rise of pines and a stretch of marsh that dropped off into dark water on the right-hand side. There were no houses for the first half-mile. There were no lights of any kind. The world was the 2 red dots of their taillights and the 2 white dots behind them. Lucas pulled a phone from his jacket pocket. Not the one Iris had given him. A different one. A prepaid he'd bought for cash at a Walmart on Thursday. Who are you calling? She said. Marcus? How do you have Marcus's number? You told me on Wednesday he'd take care of Noah if something happened to you. I wrote the number down off your phone while you were in the bathroom. I'm sorry. It felt like the smart thing to do. A beat. I'm not mad, she said. Good. He dialed. Marcus picked up on the first ring, which Lucas had been counting on. It's Lucas Reed. I'm with her. We're in Anne Arundel County on Quarry Cove Road. We have a tail. We've confirmed it through 3 turns. I don't know who. I don't know how many. I'm going to try to end it on this road. If I don't pick up again in 10 minutes, I want you to send somebody to that gas station on Route 9 in... He gave Marcus the intersection. My kid is at 1214 South Prescott, apartment 4, with a neighbor named Elena Alvarez. If anything happens to me, get him and call a woman named Angela. Iris will tell her about a fund. That's all. Don't come for us. Clean up after us. Got it? Son. A pause on the line. Got it, Marcus said. The voice was very flat. Stay alive, Mr. Reed. Working on it. He hung up. Lucas? Iris. Listen. Pass me your backpack. She did. He fished through it without looking away from the road. Her laptop was in there, and a folder of documents, and the little external hard drive clone he'd copied at the house was in her inside jacket pocket, along with the image of the main drive. Good. Here's what we're going to do, he said. About 1/4 mile ahead, the road bends hard right around a rise. On the other side of the rise, there's about 300 yards, where whoever's behind us won't see our taillights. I'm going to take it at speed. I'm going to cut the lights on the far side and pull into the first side road or pull off I can find. We'll let him pass. Then we'll circle back. What if there's no pull-off? Then I improvise. What does that mean? It means I improvise. She tightened the strap on her backpack. She put one hand on the dashboard. Her other hand, he noticed, and the noticing was a small, sharp thing in his chest, reached across the center console and rested on his forearm. Light. Not gripping. Just there. He didn't look at it. Don't die tonight, she said. Wasn't planning to. He hit the curve hard. The rental leaned, and he felt the shoulder loose under the passenger side tire for a second, and then he had it back and they were on the far side of the rise. The headlights behind him were gone. He had maybe 6 seconds before they came around. There was a gap in the trees on the left, an old logging cut by the look of it, a dirt track that ran back 15, maybe 20 feet before it curved out of sight. He killed the headlights. He jammed the wheel left. The car bumped off the asphalt onto dirt, and the undercarriage slammed once, hard, and he winced, and then they were behind the pines, and he stamped the brake and killed the engine. He grabbed Iris's wrist and pulled her down. Don't move. They crouched low in the dark, the ticking of the hot engine, the smell of pine, the sound of her breathing, close to his cheek. Headlights came around the rise. They moved slow, slower than before. Crawling. Whoever was driving had realized that he'd lost his quarry, and he was looking. The lights crept past the entrance of the logging cut. They didn't stop. They kept going. Lucas let out the breath he hadn't known he was holding. Wait, he whispered. They waited. 30 seconds. A minute? 2 minutes. The red of the other car's taillights had long since disappeared around the next curve, but Lucas didn't move until a full 2 minutes had gone by. Then he slowly lifted his head. He looked down the road. Nothing. He listened. Nothing. Okay, he said. He started the car. He did not turn the lights on. He rolled in the dark back out of the logging cut, back onto Quarry Cove Road, and he turned around and drove back the way they'd come with his lights off until they hit a paved road again. Then he turned the lights on, low beams. Low. He did not go back the way they'd come to the city. He took a route Iris found on the paper map that took them south, then west, then north, in a long, lazy loop that added 90 minutes to the drive home. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Around 2:30 in the morning, on a stretch of empty highway in Maryland, she finally spoke. Somebody knew we were there. Yeah. How? I don't know. I've been thinking about it the whole time I've been driving. Options, your phone, my phone, your car, your apartment. Somebody on the inside of your inner circle who knew you were asking questions. Somebody watching your uncle's house, which would suggest somebody who already suspected what your uncle was up to. I don't know which yet. Angela. Possible. I don't think so, but possible. Marcus. No, Marcus just helped me keep us alive. Marcus is clean. Unless Marcus tipped them so they'd back off and look clean. Unless that, but he didn't. How do you know? Because he sounded scared for you on the phone. You can't fake that in 2 seconds. Anyway, we'll sort it. That's for Monday. Tonight we just go home. She sat back against the headrest. She closed her eyes. I'm not going to your place tonight, she said. No, you're not. Where am I going? There's a Hampton Inn 40 miles up the road. You're staying there. Tomorrow Marcus moves you to somewhere we pick. Riverside is burned. Okay. I'll drop you at the hotel. I'll drive the car home, ditch it in a parking lot where I can leave it, and I'll get myself back to my son on buses like a normal man with a normal life. And tomorrow we clone the drives. In 2 days you walk into your board meeting, and then we're done. A long pause. Lucas? Yeah. Please don't be done. The car hummed along the highway. He didn't answer. He couldn't exactly. The honest answer had a shape he didn't trust himself to say out loud at 2:30 in the morning in a rented car with a woman he'd known for less than 2 weeks. I'll think about it Monday, he said finally. After the meeting, when we know what world we're in. Okay. Okay. He dropped her at the Hampton Inn at 4:10. He waited in the parking lot until she'd gone through the front doors, and he saw the flicker of lobby lights catch her, and she was through and at the desk. Then he drove. He drove for another 2 hours. He stopped once at a 24-hour diner in Pennsylvania and ordered coffee and scrambled eggs he didn't eat because he needed to sit still for 15 minutes and let the adrenaline come out of his blood the way you let a dog come out of a fight. He paid in cash. He tipped well. He left. He ditched the rental in the long-term lot at a mall 2 towns over from his, wiped the wheel and the door handles and the shift, and took a bus the rest of the way home. He was back at his apartment at 9 Sunday morning, unshaven, hollow-eyed, wearing the jacket he'd left the house in, which now smelled like pine. Mrs. Alvarez answered the door in her housecoat and took one look at him and didn't say a word about how he looked. She just stepped back to let him into the little apartment where Noah was sitting on the living room floor eating cereal out of a mug and watching a cartoon about an octopus. "Daddy!" The boy launched himself off the floor and at Lucas's knees, and Lucas caught him under the arms and lifted him up and held on. He held on for a long time. "How was Pittsburgh?" Mrs. Alvarez said from the kitchen doorway. "Fine." "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." "Well, you're home. Sit. I'll make you coffee." The boy was a perfect angel. He ate 2 grilled cheeses for dinner. He only threw one tantrum, and it was about shoes. "Thank you, Elena." "Don't mention it. Pay me next week." She clucked her tongue and went back to the kitchen. Lucas sat down on her couch with his son in his lap. Noah smelled like cereal and shampoo and the particular milky warmth of a small body. He was telling Lucas about the octopus and why the octopus had 8 hats, 1 for each leg, because you couldn't just have 1 hat for a leg. That would be unfair to the other 7 legs. Lucas didn't hear a word of it. He just held on and nodded. When Noah had run out of things to say about hats, he climbed down and went back to his cereal. Lucas pulled his phone out of his jacket. Not the flip phone, not the prepaid, his real phone, the one that had been sitting on his kitchen counter for 18 hours. There was a text from an unknown number, sent at 6:12 that morning. Got back safe. Slept 2 hours. Don't call. I'll call you tomorrow after the meeting. I. He stared at it for a minute. He deleted it. He had 2 days. 2 days and a clone of a drive that he hadn't yet looked at, sitting in his inside jacket pocket. 2 days to figure out who had tailed them out of Annapolis. 2 days until Iris Hale walked into a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building in the city and stood up in front of 12 people and told them who had tried to steal her company. He drank Mrs. Alvarez's coffee. He took his son home. He made scrambled eggs. He read the book about the mouse and the moon. He built a castle out of couch cushions and defended it against an invasion of stuffed animals. At 7:30, he put Noah to bed. At 8, he sat down at the kitchen table. He plugged the little black device into his battered laptop, the one he used for bills and nothing else, air-gapped, no Wi-Fi card. He opened the clone of Gregory Hale's hard drive. There were 640 gigabytes on it. He poured himself a cup of coffee that would keep him up until Tuesday, and he got to work. By 11 p.m., he had the first thing. An email chain deleted from the server but recovered from a local drafts folder in which Gregory Hale and Ethan Walsh discussed, in careful language, the Luxembourg vehicle and what happens when she's out, dated 7 months before the SEC filing. 3 references to our friend at the commission, unnamed. By 2 a.m., he had the second. A directory of PDF files scanned at 200 dots per inch of the falsified wire transfer records. The metadata on the PDFs showed they'd been created on a scanner registered to Gregory Hale's office at the Annapolis house, not Ethan Walsh's office, not anywhere near it. By 4 a.m., he had the third, and it was the one that mattered, a voice memo, 2 minutes and 11 seconds long, recorded on Gregory's phone and auto-backed up to the laptop when he docked it the previous weekend. Gregory, talking to himself the way old men sometimes did when they were pleased with themselves, narrating a timeline. Board meeting on the 14th, findings on the 21st, suspension vote the week after. By Thanksgiving, the recording said, in Gregory Hale's unmistakable voice, that girl is going to be signing resignation papers in her kitchen, and Ethan is going to take a very comfortable walk off a very short pier, and we are going to take the company my brother never should have left to his child, and we are going to do what we should have done 20 years ago. Lucas sat at his kitchen table at 4:15 in the morning and listened to the recording 3 times. Then he saved it to 2 thumb drives, one of which he taped to the underside of his kitchen table with electrical tape, and one of which he put in the inside pocket of his jacket, next to the hard drive clone. Then he went to the window of Noah's bedroom and stood there in the dark and watched his son sleep for a long time. On Monday morning, at 6 a.m., he sent Iris Hale a single text message from the prepaid phone. "We have enough." At 6:01, she wrote back. "Then we go." The boardroom on the 42nd floor had a view of the river and 12 seats around a table made from a single slab of walnut that had cost more than a house. At 10:05 on Monday morning, 11 of those seats were full. The 12th belonged to Iris Hale, and she was standing. She'd come in at exactly 10, in a charcoal suit and a cream-colored blouse, no jewelry except the watch that had been her father's. The cut at her hairline was almost gone now, just a faint pink line you had to be close to see. Her hair was pinned back the way she wore it on the worst days and the best days, and nobody in that room had seen her walk in unaccompanied by lawyers before. That by itself made the room go a little quiet. "You're early," Gregory Hale said. He was at the far end of the table. Gray hair, the kind of tan people got on sailboats. A navy suit that probably cost what Lucas made in a year. "I'm on time." "The agenda." "The agenda's changed, Greg. I'm taking the first 10 minutes. A thin smile. "I don't think that's—" "Then take a vote." He looked at her. He looked around the table. 11 faces looked back at him. He smiled wider, spread his hands. Of course, let the girl speak," and sat back in his chair. Lucas was not in the room. Lucas was 3 floors down in an empty office that a woman named Angela had let him into at 7 that morning, watching a live feed from the boardroom on a laptop. The camera was the one built into Iris's own laptop, which sat open on the table in front of her chair, angled just so. Nobody in the room was looking at it. It was just another piece of furniture. They had no reason to know that its microphone was on and its camera was on, and everything that happened in the next 40 minutes was being recorded to 2 drives in 2 different rooms of that building. Iris didn't sit down. 8 months ago, she said, an anonymous filing was sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission alleging that I had personally diverted company funds through a Luxembourg shell corporation. That filing was dismissed. 3 months ago, a second filing went in. That one is the subject of the independent investigator's report you're all about to hear. Before you hear it, I'd like you to hear something else. She reached down and tapped a key on her laptop. Gregory Hale's voice came out of the speakers, clear, confident, a little pleased with himself. By Thanksgiving, that girl is going to be signing resignation papers in her kitchen, and Ethan is going to take a very comfortable walk off a very short pier, and we are going to take the company my brother never should have left to his child, and we are going to do what we should have done 20 years ago. The room did not react the way rooms in movies react. There was no gasp. There was a small collective intake of breath, a couple of chairs creaking as people shifted, and then there was a quiet so total Lucas could hear, through the laptop speaker 3 floors up, the hum of the building's ventilation. Gregory Hale's face did something strange. It didn't change, exactly. It froze. The smile stayed in place, but the thing behind it, the thing that made the smile a smile, stepped back and closed a door. "Iris," he said. "Don't." "Iris, that's—" "Don't, Greg. Don't say it's been manipulated. Don't say it's out of context. Don't. We have the original file. We have the timestamp. We have the metadata. We have, as of this morning, 17 separate pieces of corroborating evidence, including emails between you and Ethan discussing, quote, the Luxembourg vehicle, unquote, dated 7 months before the first SEC filing. We have the scanner in your Annapolis office that created the falsified PDFs. We have your own voice on tape explaining to yourself what you were going to do." Her voice did not rise. That was the part Lucas noticed. Her voice did not rise once. She sounded, if anything, tired, like a doctor explaining a diagnosis. "To the board," she said, turning her eyes to the other 10 people at the table. "I am formally requesting that Mr. Gregory Hale and Mr. Ethan Walsh be suspended from their duties, effective immediately, pending the outcome of a full internal and external investigation into securities fraud, defamation, and attempted corporate seizure. I am also formally requesting that outside counsel, not our existing firm, which Gregory also uses for personal matters, be retained by this afternoon. Angela has a list of 3 firms ready. I'd like us to pick one before lunch." Ethan Walsh, who had gone the color of wet paper during the voice recording, opened his mouth. No sound came out. "Ethan," Iris said, not unkindly, "I'd get a lawyer." "I didn't—" I know you didn't. I know you signed things you shouldn't have, and you made a few calls you were told to make, and you're probably going to tell me, in a deposition sometime in the next 8 weeks, that you didn't know how bad it was. And maybe you didn't. but you knew it was bad, and you did it anyway, and I trusted you, and my father trusted you. So get a lawyer and save whatever you've got that might keep you out of prison, because I'm not saving any of it for you." She looked back at Gregory.
Uncle. The word from her mouth wasn't quite a word. It was a weight. "You were at my father's funeral," she said. "You gave a speech. You said he was the best man you'd ever known. Do you remember that?" Gregory's jaw worked. "Do you remember that?" she said again. "Iris, answer the question." "Yes." "Did you mean it?" He didn't answer. "That's what I thought." She turned her face away from him. She was done looking at him. Lucas saw it through the camera. The exact second she stopped being his niece and started being something else. She turned back to the rest of the board. "I'm going to step out of this room for 15 minutes, she said. "When I come back, I'd like a vote. If you vote to suspend me based on a report you have not yet read, that's your right. If you vote to suspend Mr. Hale and Mr. Walsh based on what you've just heard, that's also your right. If you need more time, you can have it, but you can't have much of it, because by the time the markets close this afternoon, this story is going to have a shape. And I'd like the shape it has to be the shape we chose." She closed the laptop, gently. She walked out of the room. Lucas, on the other end of the camera feed, sat back in his chair and let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since Saturday night. Angela, who had been standing behind him the whole time with her arms crossed, said, "Huh. Yeah. She's better at this than I thought she was. I had a feeling. You were right." They waited. Iris came back in at 10:22. The board had taken 14 minutes. The vote was 9-2. The two were Gregory, who voted against his own suspension, and a thin man in rimless glasses named Pritchard, who Lucas would later learn had been the other swing vote Iris had been worried about, and who, in the end, had decided to go down with a sinking ship for reasons nobody ever fully understood. It didn't matter. 9 was enough. Gregory Hale stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at his niece for a long moment. Lucas, watching through the camera, couldn't read the expression, and he'd been reading faces for a living once. And then he turned and walked out of the room without a word. Ethan Walsh stayed where he was, with his head in his hands. Iris sat down. "All right," she said, to the 9 remaining faces around the table. "Let's talk about what we do now." Lucas closed the laptop. He sat back in his chair in the empty office. Angela was looking at him. "She asked me to tell you something, if this went the way she hoped," Angela said. "Yeah?" "She said to tell you, quote, you were right about him being 64, unquote, and to go home and hug your kid." Lucas nodded. He could not, at that moment, have said anything more complicated than a nod. He got his jacket. He took the back elevator down. He walked out of the building by a service exit that Angela had told him about, and he took 2 buses and a 15-minute walk home, which had become his signature route by then. And when he got to his apartment at 1 in the afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez was there with Noah and a pot of chicken soup, because she'd guessed, in the way she had of guessing, that it had been a day. "Was it a good day or a bad day?" she said, handing him a bowl. "Good day." "Good." He ate the soup. Noah climbed into his lap halfway through and finished the broth for him. Over the next 10 days, the story broke open the way those things do. Not in an explosion, but in a long, slow chain of small news stories, each of which added one new piece to the picture. Hale Dynamics released a statement Monday afternoon. The Wall Street Journal had it by Tuesday. By Friday, Gregory Hale had resigned from every board he sat on and retreated to his daughter's house in Connecticut, which was farther away than the Annapolis place and apparently easier to hide in. Ethan Walsh had retained a criminal defense attorney and was, according to the rumors that reached Lucas secondhand through Angela, negotiating for a cooperation agreement. 3 mid-level employees, whose names Lucas never learned, resigned quietly over the following 2 weeks. The stock opened down 4% on Tuesday and closed up 2 by the end of the week, because markets, it turned out, liked a CEO who survived an assassination attempt. Iris was in meetings 18 hours a day for the first week. Lucas barely heard from her. He got one text, Wednesday night, from the prepaid. "Wire will hit your account Thursday. 75 plus 50 for Saturday. Don't argue." He stared at the phone for a long time. Then he wrote back, "I said I wouldn't argue. I'm not arguing." A pause. 3 dots. They stopped. They started. They stopped.
Then, thank you, Lucas. That was all. The money hit Thursday morning, $125,000 in a single wire into his account. He stood in his kitchen looking at the number on his phone screen for a long time. He felt mostly nothing, or maybe just the small relief of a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying being set down. He paid his rent for 6 months in advance that afternoon. He took Noah to the shoe store and bought him 3 pairs of shoes, a size too big, because Noah's feet kept growing faster than the boy himself did. He took his car to a real mechanic for the first time in a year and got the timing belt replaced and 2 tires and a battery, and the bill came to $1,100 and he paid it without flinching. He put the rest into a savings account. He didn't touch it. He went back to work. Dale at the Shell was mildly surprised to see him on Thursday night because Lucas had called in sick Monday and Tuesday, but Dale did not press the question because Dale had never in his life pressed a question. Lucas stood behind the counter from 10 until 7, and the rain came down and people bought coffee and Marlboros and lottery tickets, and he rang them up, and it was the most ordinary week he'd had in a month. He kept waiting for her to call. She didn't. That was okay. She was busy. She'd said she'd call after the meeting and he'd told her he'd think about it Monday, and Monday had come and gone. And here they were. And maybe this was her answer. Maybe the right thing for both of them was that she walked back into her world and he stayed in his, and the $75,000 turned into a story he would tell himself years from now as a thing that had once happened. It was the sensible version. He found he did not like the sensible version as much as he'd expected to. On the second Tuesday after the meeting, 12 days, he was walking Noah home from the community center. It was a cold, bright afternoon, the kind where the sun was out but the air bit at your ears. Noah had a piece of yellow construction paper folded into something he insisted was a boat, and he was narrating its nautical adventures as they walked. Halfway down the block, Lucas saw a woman leaning against a car parked at the curb. Dark coat, no scarf, hands in her pockets. The car was a plain sedan, the kind rental fleets had in bulk. He slowed. Iris pushed off the car and walked toward him. She walked carefully, but the walking boot was gone. She stopped a few feet short. "Hi," she said. "Hi." Noah, who had not yet registered that anything unusual was happening, kept going until he was even with Lucas's knee, and then stopped and looked up and looked at Iris and said, "You're the sad lady from the park." Iris's mouth twitched. "Hello," she said. "That's me." "You're not as sad now." "No, I'm not. Not right this minute." "That's good." "Thank you." "I think so too." Lucas looked at her. "You could have called," he said. "I wanted to," she said. I didn't want it to be a phone call." "Okay. Is this a bad time?" "No, it's fine. Come up." They went up. Mrs. Alvarez, who was sitting in the lobby because she liked to sit in the lobby in the afternoons and watch people come in and out, looked at Iris with a frank and curious interest as they went by, and Lucas gave her a small nod, and she gave him a small nod back, and by tomorrow afternoon the entire building was going to know a woman had come to see him. He didn't care. In the apartment, he took Noah's coat off him and put the yellow paper boat on the counter with great ceremony and told Noah he could watch one episode of The Octopus Show, and Noah, who knew a negotiation when he heard one, agreed. Lucas turned on the TV in the living room, settled Noah in front of it with a cup of goldfish crackers, and then he and Iris went into the kitchen and sat down at the little table with the scratched formica top. It was a small kitchen. She looked at first like she didn't know what to do with herself in a room that size. Then, slowly, she relaxed. She took off her coat. She put it on the back of the chair. "Water?" he said. "Yes." He filled 2 glasses. He sat down. He waited. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. "You already did." "I wanted to say it in person." "Okay, you're saying it in person." "Lucas." "Yeah." She took a breath. "I thought a lot about what I was going to say to you," she said. "I wrote it down on Sunday night. I rewrote it on the flight back from Zurich yesterday. I had 3 drafts. They were all terrible. The more I tried to write it, the more it sounded like a speech by the kind of person I don't want to be anymore. So don't give a speech." "Okay." She looked at her hands. "The people I was raised around," she said, they don't really let anybody in. not the way you'd let somebody in. Every relationship there's a ledger. There's always a ledger. Even with my father. He loved me, I know he did, but he also raised me to be the person who would run the company, and those two things were never fully separate in his head. And I grew up knowing that if I failed at the second one, he would still love me. But something in him would go out that he couldn't turn back on. That's a lot to put on a kid. Yes, it is. She took a sip of the water. So I've spent most of my adult life, she said, figuring out how to make sure nobody has a ledger with me, including my husband, which is, in retrospect, one of the reasons I don't have a husband. And then I crashed a car at a gas station. He didn't say anything. He let her get there. I offered you $75,000, she said, and you said no, and you only said yes later because I made it a job. And when I made it a job, you still wouldn't take the money for it until after the thing was over. And the whole time you were doing it, you argued with me about eating sandwiches, and you kept asking me if I'd slept. And on Saturday night, when I asked you to do something I had no right to ask you to do, you did it. And when it went wrong, you got us out. Iris, I'm not done. Okay. And on Sunday, you didn't ask for anything. You didn't ask to come to the meeting. You didn't ask for a photo of yourself with me. You didn't ask for a job or a title or a business card. You took the money I owed you, and you went back to the Shell, and you worked the night shift, and you bought your kids shoes. And I sat in Zurich for 4 days, and I couldn't sleep because every time I closed my eyes, I saw my uncle's face when the recording played. And then I couldn't sleep because every time I stopped seeing my uncle's face, I started thinking about the way you made me a turkey sandwich. He laughed, once. He couldn't help it. She looked up at him, and her eyes were wet, which he had not been expecting. She did not let them spill. She was not that kind of crier. But he saw the wet. I don't know what I'm offering you, she said. That's the problem. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend I do. I don't know what you want. I'm not sure I know what I want. I know I don't want this to be... I don't want the last time I see you to have been the thing on Saturday night. I don't want the story of us to end with a wire transfer. That's not nothing. It's not a plan. It's the truest sentence I've said in 2 weeks. He looked at her across the table, at the line of her mouth, which was doing the thing it did when she was holding herself together, at the place at her hairline where the cut had been. Iris. Yeah. I told you in the car Saturday night. I told you I'd think about it Monday. I have been thinking about it every day since. And I'm 32 years old. I work nights at a gas station. I'm raising a little kid on my own. I have a past I'm not going to tell you the details of for a long time, maybe ever. I have a very small apartment with a crack in the living room ceiling. I have, as of last week, a savings account with more money in it than I have ever had in my life. And that money came from you, and I don't want to build anything on top of a thing where I took money from you. Lucas, let me finish. Okay. I'm not going to be good at your world. I'm not going to a fundraiser in Georgetown with you. I'm not going to stand next to you at a ribbon cutting. If that's what you're looking for, you should find somebody else. There are a lot of men in your city with better suits and better smiles who would be very happy to do all of that. I don't want that. Let me finish. Okay? But he stopped. He looked at the Formica table. He looked at the wall. He looked at her. But if what you're saying is what I think you're saying, if you're saying you want to know what this is, without a plan, without a ledger, without either of us having to decide in this kitchen today what it ends up being, just if you're asking if you can come over on a Tuesday night when I'm off work and sit at this table and eat whatever I cook, which is mostly pasta, and watch my kid be a 4-year-old and go home, if you're asking for that. He took a breath. Then yes, he said. The answer is yes. She put her hand flat on the table, palm down, and he saw her shoulders let go of something they had been holding for much longer than 2 weeks. Yes, she said, that's what I'm asking. Okay. Okay. They sat there at the little kitchen table in the apartment with the crack in the living room ceiling. In the other room, an animated octopus was putting hats on his 8 legs, and a 4-year-old was laughing, and the heater was making the noise it always made in winter, the thin clang of metal warming up. Lucas? Yeah. Can I meet your son? Not today. I know today's not the day, but sometime. He thought about it. Yeah, he said, sometime. Okay, then quieter. I'd like that. She stood up. She put her coat back on. He walked her to the door. In the doorway, she turned and looked at him. She didn't try to kiss him. He didn't try to kiss her. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was, he didn't know what to call it, the thing before the thing. I'll call you this weekend, she said. Use the regular phone. You can throw the prepaid out. Okay. And eat something between now and the weekend. A small smile. I'll try. Don't try. Do it. All right, bossy. Yeah, well. She went. He closed the door. He stood with his hand on the door for a minute. Then he walked back into the living room where Noah was in the exact position he'd been in 5 minutes ago, crackers scattered around him, eyes locked on the octopus. Daddy. Yeah, bud. Was that the sad lady? Yeah, that was her. I told you she looked sad. You did. Is she going to be a friend? Lucas sat down on the couch next to his son. Noah immediately leaned against him, not even looking away from the screen, the way the boy did, the way he'd been doing since he was small enough to fit in the crook of Lucas's arm. I don't know, bud, Lucas said. He put his arm around his son. Noah, eyes still on the octopus, reached up with one small hand and patted Lucas's cheek twice, absent and firm, the way he did when he thought Lucas needed patting. Outside, the afternoon light was starting to go gold. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed, a dog barked, a bus hissed by. Lucas sat on the couch with his son leaning against him, and he didn't say anything else, and the octopus show played on, and for the first time in a very long time he let himself think, carefully, in a small voice, that maybe, just maybe. The maybe became a Tuesday, and then another Tuesday, and then a Saturday afternoon at the park, where Iris sat on the same bench she had once sat on as a stranger, and this time a 4-year-old in rubber boots ran up and showed her, with extreme seriousness, a rock he had found that was, in his professional opinion, the best rock. She studied the rock like it was a quarterly report. It's a very good rock, she said. I know, Noah said, and ran away. Lucas, watching from a few feet off, didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Iris looked up at him with a small, slightly winded expression, like a person who had just been handed something she wasn't sure she was allowed to hold. And he nodded once, and that was that. The Tuesdays became regular. The Saturdays became regular. She learned how Noah took his toast, no crusts, butter only on one half, the butter half, and Noah learned that the sad lady wasn't sad anymore and decided, in the generous and uncomplicated way of small children, that she was now simply Iris, not an aunt, not a friend of Daddy's, just Iris. She came over on Tuesdays and she ate pasta, and she built things out of couch cushions that were objectively worse than the ones Lucas built, and Noah was merciless about it, and she took the criticism in the way she had once taken criticism from her board, which was to say, with a straight face and a careful nod, and everyone involved understood it was a kind of love. The first time she stayed for dinner on a Sunday, Mrs. Alvarez knocked on the door at 7:30 with a Tupperware of flan she had made too much of, and accepted the invitation to come in for coffee with the complete lack of surprise of a woman who had been expecting this day for some time. Lucas went back to work, and then he didn't. Dale at the Shell was sorry to lose him. Lucas, who had $100,000 in a savings account, and a 4-year-old who was about to start kindergarten, decided that what he wanted to do next was something that let him be home at dinner time. He took a job doing private security consulting for a small firm a friend of Marcus's ran. It was daytime work, boring in the way he had come to value boring, and it paid enough that he didn't need to touch the savings. The savings he left alone. He decided, without ever saying it out loud, that that money was going to be Noah's someday, and he wasn't going to spend it on himself. Iris didn't ask him to move into the city. He didn't ask her to move out of it. They met in the middle, which was mostly his kitchen. She learned how to cook exactly 2 things, a passable chicken soup and a very bad omelet, and she was stubbornly proud of both. He stopped trying to fix the omelet. It was hers to be bad at. They didn't rush anything. That was the part that surprised people who knew pieces of the story. Friends of hers, Angela, Marcus, even Mrs. Alvarez, who one evening in the lobby said, in her frank and unanswerable way, "You two are taking your sweet time." And Lucas had said, "Yeah, Elena, we are." because he had been rushed once in his old life. And Iris had been pushed her whole life toward one thing or another, and nobody had ever asked her what pace was hers. So they went slow. They went at the pace of a child learning to ride a bike without training wheels, which is the pace of someone who knows the falling is part of it. There was a wedding, eventually, 2 years on. It was small. It was held at the back of a restaurant that made very good bread, and Noah wore a little suit and carried the rings on a pillow and dropped the pillow twice, because he was 6 by then and had decided that the correct thing to do with any ceremonial object was to investigate whether it bounced. Iris laughed so hard at the second drop that she had to lean against Lucas to stay upright, and he kept his arm around her waist and his other hand on his son's shoulder. And Mrs. Alvarez, who was in the front row in a dress the color of a ripe plum, cried without apologizing for it. A daughter came after that. They named her Claire, which had been Iris's mother's name. Claire was, from birth, unimpressed by most things, and her older brother adored her with the fierce proprietary love of a boy who had waited a long time for a person of his own to protect. The company thrived. That part surprised no one. What surprised people? What sometimes surprised Iris herself when she caught her reflection in the window of a car at night and didn't recognize the softness in her own face, was how unremarkable the rest of it turned out to be. How the big thing, the thing the whole story had been building toward, turned out to not be a thing at all. Just a life. Small dinners. Long drives. A boy growing into a man, slowly. A girl learning to walk. A husband who still, at 50, got up first on Saturday mornings to make coffee because he liked the quiet, and a wife who eventually learned to sleep in. If there was a lesson, Lucas thought sometimes, usually on those quiet Saturday mornings, standing at the kitchen window with a cup in his hands, looking out at a yard that was his, it was this. The people who try to save you with money and promises are almost never the ones who actually do it. The ones who do it usually don't know they're doing it. They just show up. They open a car door in the rain. They make you a sandwich when you forget to eat. They drive you home without asking where home is. And the ones worth loving are the ones who, when you show up for them, don't ask to see your resume. They just let you in. He had been nobody. She had been everybody. Neither of those had turned out to be true in the end. They had just been two tired people at a gas station in the middle of a storm, and somehow that had been enough to start with. Which, Lucas came to believe, was how most real things started. Not with a grand entrance, but with a person deciding, quietly, to stay. He had stayed. She had stayed. And the rest, for the rest of their lives, was just the staying.